and roads. It's a 1950s idea of what local government should be about.
I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Mr Chair. Thank you, Mr Chair. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First on the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill. I was one of the members of the Select Committee that considered this, and there were 775 written submissions and 186 oral submissions. And it was most interesting, Mr Chair, these submissions that came from all over New Zealand, and the committee sat in Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch. It was most interesting that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, opposed this amendment bill. And these were organisations and councils and community groups and individuals and people from all over the country saying this was not healthy for our important second tier of local government in New Zealand. But it was interesting, the organisations who did support it. And again, it was the organisations who are the mates of the national government, the likes of Business New Zealand, the likes of Federated Farmers, the likes of Chamber of Commerce, all the ones who stand to gain the most from a monetary point of view, from the paybacks and for sidling up to the national government, all of those ones, you know, the Federated Farmers and all these sorts of people who could gain from having yet another go at our local councils throughout New Zealand, the important glue that keeps our communities, our towns, our cities, our districts working as a country. And it was most disappointing to hear some of the comments of what the effects of this would be. And in particular, Mr Chair, it was the reference to the four well-beings. And Ian McKelvey is sitting over there, a former mayor of Rangitikei district. He'll know full well how important it is for a community to work in terms of the four well-beings to bring the social, the cultural, the economic and the environmental considerations into decision-making of a council. Because you don't do these things in isolation. You don't just do it for an economic reason, and you don't just do it for an environmental reason. You don't just do it for a social reason, and you don't just do it for a cultural reason. You do it as a combined effect of the four well-beings for any part of society. And by removing that from the Local Government Act 2002, we are basically undermining the society in New Zealand and being able to provide good quality local communities. And that was the concern that echoed through so many of the submissions, that what will happen is this will open up all the local authorities and local councils to a whole lot of litigation. Litigation from vexatious litigants who will say, oh, if I'm the Chamber of Commerce, I don't agree with this because it's not to do with economics and businesses in the city or this district, so we'll oppose it because this has only really got good social or cultural outcomes. Or, on the other hand, you might have a particular green or environmental group who opposes it because, oh, this has only got good economic considerations, but they're not thinking of the environmental effects of this. And so what it opens up is every council will end up having to fight lots and lots of battles against lots and lots of groups because we're taking away in this bill, or the government is taking away in this bill, the right of those councils to consider those four well-beings in tandem to see what is the outcome for the community that they represent. Now, I've been in local government for 9 years, and I know how important it is to have those four considerations. And the new member for North Shore might think she's been here a long time in government, but she's only been here actually 5 minutes and doesn't know much about it. And perhaps when she spent 9 years in local government, and rather than being, in the back garden plucking weeds, perhaps when she spent 9 years in local government, she might realise what it's about. And it's about making balanced decisions. It's about making balanced decisions across a community and not taking a decision on the basis of just certain factors. Now, in this particular case, we heard a lot of false truths from the government as well. And they reeled out all those old stories which Rodney Hyde used to reel out in this parliament. They mentioned things like, local authorities have bought things like lotto stores in Bluff. How dare they buy a lotto store? We heard this from the likes of Nick Smith. They bought a lotto store in Bluff. Well, we had a submission from the Southland Council who said they bought a complex in the Bluff Township which in one corner of the store there happened to be a Lotto outlet. But this whole store was up for sale. It was on the block, and they needed to acquire it for a redevelopment of the Bluff, this area in Bluff. Typical. But typical of this government, the headlines are Council buys Lotto. Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
I call
Mr.
the
Chair.
Honourable Member Andrew William.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another lie they put out was another council in Hawera, the South Taranaki Council, I think it was, bought a picture theatre. And how dare they buy a picture theatre? What a ridiculous council to spend money on it. And again, this was to try and back up the falsehoods they put out about local government. And again, a submission came along, I think it was the South Taranaki Council, and said, well, actually, the government was wrong. We bought this complex because it had closed down, it was not viable in the township, and it was part of the centre of town for providing social and entertainment for the town, which was going to die. And they said the nearest place for the young people of Hawera to go to was New Plymouth, something like 50 or 60 miles away, and the township decided they did not want their young people driving in cars to New Plymouth on a Friday, Saturday night, and coming back at midnight on dangerous country roads, and they as a community decided, we want to keep this thing open, we want to put some community funding into supporting this, and they did. Their decision, a good decision. But under this bill, there'll be so many challenges along those lines, because that was a good decision based on the social, the cultural, also the economic effects of that particular township and that district, and they wanted to do it. But again, this national government trumpeted it as being another failure of a council buying a cinema. Well, for that community, it worked. For that community, it was a good outcome. And when you look through this bill, and isn't it a shame that the Minister wasn't here to take the thing, but we all know that the Minister's already moving out to become the next Speaker of this Parliament, to make way for Nick Smith to come back in to take over local government again. And so New Zealanders listening to this telecast today, be very afraid. Be very afraid, because the local government minister who was kicked out 6 months ago, who started most of this and who was behind most of this, who had also Rodney Hyde's hand up his back for most of this, he is going to be back probably soon after Christmas when the big reshuffle comes. When the big reshuffle comes, Nick Smith will be back in the helm. David Carter will be sitting up there in the Speaker's thing. Lockwood Smith will be off to London to the High Commissioner's residence. We all know this is going to happen. And Nick Smith will be back there. And the thing that we heard also from the Labor Speaker earlier, Nick Smith will finally get his way in Tasman and Nelson, because he wanted an amalgamation there. He'll push for that. And he will want more amalgamations around New Zealand. And he will create the environment to do that. And one of the ways of creating the environment to do that is this business of giving all the mayors all these additional powers. So you'll end up with mayors against their own councils. And their own councils will have fighting with their mayors, because they're giving virtually executive powers to the mayors, a bit like the Auckland mayor. And what happens there is that this is what the Honourable Nick Smith will want, is that you get the council fighting with the mayor and the mayor fighting with the council. It becomes all disjointed, a bit like Bob Parker and his council down in Christchurch. And suddenly, what do they get? The minister says, this council's dysfunctional, let's send in a commissioner, or let's send in a Crown manager. As minister, I'm going to do it. And I mark my words, New Zealand, mark my words, if this government gets away with this within the next 2 years, and very soon after the next local body elections, mark my words, after the 2013 elections, there will be lots of Crown managers being appointed around New Zealand, because the minister will decide, the minister, Honourable Nick Smith, who will be the next local government, he'll decide he doesn't like this particular council, he doesn't like the way they're running their business, he doesn't like what's happening, and then once again the Nats will go in. And they'll go in there on the basis of what Federated Farms have said, or on the basis of what Business New Zealand has said, or on the basis of what some other national government mates group has said, and that's what they'll do. And so what we're seeing in this country, Mr. Chairman, is a breakdown of local democracy. The important second tier of government in New Zealand are our local authorities. We're seeing the undermining of this. It's symptomatic of this government's modus operandi of putting up combative forms of governance throughout New Zealand, and then basically destroying the fabric of our society. This is not good legislation. New Zealanders deserve better. When you look at the walls around this Parliament, and you look at Passchendaele, and you look at Messines, and you look at Gallipoli, and you look at all the names of people who went away to fight for this country, for democracy and for decency, This is not the way in undermining our second important tier of local government. Thank you.
I call the Honourable Dr.